There's a particular kind of cruelty in a swan song that the audience doesn't know is a swan song. When Magic arrived in September 1982, the people who bought it, the people who reviewed it, even the people who played on it, almost none of them knew they were holding a farewell note. Ian Gillan knew. He'd written every lyric with the full knowledge that he was about to pull the plug. The rest of the band found out the same way everyone else did. After the fact, blindsided, furious, and broke. This is the story of Magic, the final album, the hidden concept record nobody knew was a concept record, and the implosion that ended one of the most exciting bands of the early 80s. Before we get into the record itself, we need to address the elephant in the room, or rather, the guitarist who left it. Bernie Torme was gone, the chaotic, punk-infused Stratocaster player who defined the sound of Glory Road and Future Shock had walked out in 1981, and the circumstances of his departure were telling. Torme had commissioned an audit of the band's finances and didn't like what he found. The musicians weren't receiving their promised earnings, and he left. His replacement was Janick Gers, who you may know better as the guy who's been playing in Iron Maiden since 1990, but who at this point was a young, blazing guitarist fresh from a band called White Spirit. Gers brought raw energy and genuine technical firepower to the room. He and John McCoy co-wrote several of the album's tracks together, but no matter how good Gers was, and he was very good, his arrival couldn't paper over what was happening beneath the surface. The band that made Magic was a band on the edge of a complete collapse, and everybody could feel it, even if nobody was saying it out loud. To understand Magic, you have to understand the money situation, or rather, the complete absence of a money situation. By 1982, despite charting multiple UK top 20 albums, despite selling out arenas across Europe and Japan, the Gillan band was catastrophically broke. Not struggling, not tight, broke. Ian Gillan himself was approaching personal bankruptcy. How does a band that successful end up with nothing? A few reasons, all of them compounding each other simultaneously. The band had set up an equal share arrangement from the beginning, a genuinely egalitarian structure where all members split income, royalties, and merchandise evenly. Noble in theory, disastrous in practice, because what the musicians didn't fully grasp was that they were also equally liable for the operating costs. These costs were enormous, and because nobody else in the band had the capital to cover them, Gillan ended up financing the whole enterprise out of his own pocket. He was subsidizing his own band, every tour, every recording session, every piece of gear. It was coming out of his reserves. And those reserves were being attacked from multiple directions at once. So let's go back a little bit. During the Deep Purple years, Gillan had invested aggressively in 3 business ventures outside of music. By 1982, all 3 were failing at the same time. Kingsway Recorders, his own recording studio, the facility where the band made most of the records, had been compromised when British Airways moved into the offices above and installed a massive computer server room. The electrical hum and vibrations were so severe that daytime recording became impossible. The studio could only operate at night, and it was hemorrhaging money. His hotel, the Thames Valley, was being run by a fraudulent operator. Local contractors and builders weren't being paid. It was a mess with his name attached to it. And a motorcycle engine manufacturing investment had been wiped out entirely by the collapse of Norton Villiers' Triumph and the unstoppable advance of Japanese competition. Meanwhile, the band had zero American footprint, no U.S. touring, no radio airplay, no stateside income. In the 1980s, without the American market, a rock band was leaving the most lucrative revenue stream on the table entirely. The rumors circulating among the musicians that tour profits were being quietly diverted to prop up Gillan's failing personal businesses didn't help morale. By the time they entered the studio in July and August of 1982 to record Magic, the mood was toxic. Tensions had boiled over into physical violence. John McCoy had physically assaulted the band's manager, Phil Bansfield, over withheld wages. The touring crew was working without pay, and Ian Gillan had already, privately, made his decision. What makes Magic genuinely fascinating and uncomfortable is what Gillan was doing lyrically while all this was happening. Music critics and historians looking back at the record have reached a fairly consistent conclusion. Magic is a hidden concept album about the dissolution of the band, and Gillan wrote it knowing exactly what he was doing. The rest of the band had no idea. Look at the track titles. Caught in a Trap, Long Gone, Living a Lie. These aren't coincidences. Gillan was documenting his own exit in plain sight, and nobody around him caught it. Primary songwriting was handled between Gillan and Colin Towns, whose influence on the album sound is enormous. Where the early records were defined by Bernie Torme's raw chaotic guitar energy, Magic leans heavily into polished synthesizers and melodic structures. Towns' keyboards are at the front of the mix in a way they'd never been before. It's a slicker, more overtly 80s record, and depending on your relationship with the band, that's either an interesting evolution or betrayal of everything that made Glory Road great. The album opens with What's the Matter and Bluesy Blue Sea, co-written by Gers and McCoy. These are the heaviest, fastest tracks on the record. They represent the last gasp of that explosive metal energy Gers brought over from White Spirit. They're excellent. They're also somewhat misleading about what the rest of the album is going to do. Caught in a Trap is the lyrical centerpiece, up-tempo musically, but lyrically as dark as anything Gillan ever wrote. He's singing explicitly about exhaustion and feeling cornered by the financial ruin. In retrospect, it's almost uncomfortably direct. Demon Driver closed out size 1, then briefly reprises on size 2. A multi-part dramatic piece that showcases the best of what Gers and Towns could do together, blazing leads over classical-inspired keyboard arrangements. And there's Long Gone, the secondary single, heavily Towns-driven, synth-forward, slick enough for UK rock radio in 1982. It performed, it got airplay. Sounds like a band moving forward. It was actually a eulogy. The lead single and commercial push was something different entirely, a heavy rock cover of Stevie Wonder's Living for the City, released as a 7-inch picture disc with a promo video. The band debuted it live at the Monster Rock Festival at Castle Donington right before the album came out. It's a blistering version, and it was the right choice. For a first single, it got people in the door. The album peaked at number 17 on the UK charts. Respectable, not the number 3 of Glory Road, but respectable under the circumstances. The fact that it charted at all is something of a miracle. Shortly after release, Ian Gillan made his announcement. He was dissolving the band. Officially, the reason given was surgery for damaged vocal cords and nodules. The reality is that he received a lucrative offer to join Black Sabbath as a salaried employee for their 1983 Born Again album. A fixed wage, no overhead, no collapsing business empire to prop up, and he took it immediately to pull himself back from the edge of bankruptcy. The rest of the band found out when he told them they had performed on the record without knowing its lyrics were documenting their own ending. The fury was real, and it lasted for decades. John McCoy, true to form, did something about it, leveraging his role as co-producer and engineer on much of the band's material and a direct access to the tape vaults at Kingsway. McCoy took physical possession of the master tapes, thousands of feet of multi-track recordings, unreleased outtakes, alternate takes, live concert boards. He established a legitimate legal claim to them based on his financing and engineering of the sessions, meaning Gillan and former management couldn't block him from the material or claim the royalties. Beginning in the late 1990s, McCoy released the archives as the Gillan tapes, 3 volumes, followed by live packages, and critically, he cut out management entirely. The revenues went directly and evenly to surviving band members, Towns, Torme, Underwood, but didn't make anyone rich. It was financial justice 2 decades late. McCoy also tried to keep the fire burning in real time. In late 1982, he pulled together a new band, aptly titled McCoy, with Mick Underwood and Bernie Torme. They released a self-titled mini-album in 1983. Heavy, bass-forward, unmistakably the Gillan lineage. It didn't break through. The music industry had moved on to glam metal and MTV aesthetics, and without Ian Gillan's name above the marquee, the doors that had previously opened didn't open. The band eventually evolved into GMT, years later giving McCoy and Torme a vehicle to play on their own terms, right up until Bernie Torme's passing in 2019. Now, Janick Gers didn't disappear quietly after Gillan folded, but the road here to Iron Maiden was a lot stranger and longer than you might expect. The immediate aftermath was rough. When Gillan dissolved in 1982, Gers was left flat broke. In 1985, he landed a spot in Gogmagog, a heavily publicized supergroup put together by producer Jonathan King that, In a twist of irony, featured 2 former members of Iron Maiden, original vocalist Paul Di'Anno and drummer Clive Burr. The project collapsed after releasing just one poorly received EP. Dejected, Gers walked away from playing full-time, returned to school, and completed a humanities degree, believing his time in major rock bands was permanently over. The turnaround came from the most unlikely of places. Bruce Dickinson had been commissioned to write a solo track for Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, and needed the guitarist quickly reaching out to Gers to co-write and record a song called Bring Your Daughter to the Slaughter. The chemistry was immediate. So immediate that inspired them to write and record an entire solo album, Tattoo Millionaire, with Gers as primary guitarist. And then Adrian Smith left Iron Maiden. Dickinson, having witnessed Gers' skill on Hill's stage presence firsthand, immediately recommended him to Steve Harris. At the audition, Gers showed up expecting a casual jam, only to find a massive rehearsal space and won the band over, not just with his playing, but with his chaotic, acrobatic energy. He's been there ever since. And when Adrian Smith rejoined in 1999, Harris simply refused to let Gers go, permanently expanding Maiden to a 3-guitar lineup, and they remain that to this day. Magic is a strange record to sit with. It's good, better than its reputation in some corners suggests, but it's overshadowed by everything happening around it. A band being eaten alive by debt, a frontman writing goodbye letters in the liner notes that nobody was allowed to read, musicians playing their hearts out for an album that was, unbeknownst to them, already the past tense. That's the Gillan story. Next time we follow Ian Gillan into the belly of the beast, Black Sabbath, Born Again, one of the most chaotic chapters in the entire history of this family tree. So I'm closing the chapter on Gillan, but he will be appearing in the next Black Sabbath album, and he goes back to Deep Purple, so that's coming soon, but I still have a few more albums with Rainbow and Whitesnake to talk about, so I'll be talking about them as well. And that's all coming up. Check out the playlist, should be on the screen right now, and that has all the videos in this series from the beginning. And like and subscribe. See you in the next one.